Tonight on Free Minds TV, we're going to be showing part 2 of our interview with Richard Van Wickler, Superintendent for the Cheshire County Department of Corrections. Richard's going to be talking about the jail system in America, specifically a new one that's being built right here in Keene, New Hampshire. We're also going to be talking about the rising cost of the Iraq War, this week's Downsizer Dispatch, and a whole lot more when we come back on Free Minds TV. Welcome to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you to think outside the box. I'm Toby Island.
And I'm Nick Michaelevich.
All right, we've got a lot going on tonight. First, we will be getting to a whole lot of stuff. We're talking about the Iraq War, a bailiff who forgot a prisoner in a jail cell without food or water for 4 days, a few other articles that we'll be getting into. But first, we want to show the second part of an interview we did with Richard Van Wickler, who is the superintendent for the Cheshire County Department of Corrections. Last week, Richard was talking a lot about the war on drugs. He is also a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. So although he's in the industry of locking people up behind bars, he doesn't feel that there's any point in putting nonviolent, say, drug users in jail for it.
Right, and you know, the reason we're building more prisons in this country every day is because of the war on drugs, and Richard understands that, given his position both as somebody who understands the reasons to end the war on drugs and a person who also runs a jail. I mean, that's his job.
He's been doing it for, what, 15 years or something?
15, I think it was 15 years, and at least 10 of those have been in Cheshire County, so he's been at it a long time, and so he understands the relation between the war on drugs and the problems it causes in our prison system. So, you know, he has an authority to speak on that.
Well, if you want to see last week's interview, it's up at freemindstv.com. You can go there. He's talking specifically more about the drug policy and Law Enforcement Against Prohibition last week. Tonight, he's talking about the jail system in general, and specifically a new one that's being built right here in Keene, New Hampshire. Well, let's go ahead and roll the clip, see what Richard has to say about the jail system.
This facility currently, it allows some of the inmates to work on the county farm, so they have that work release opportunity. Is there going to be anything like that at the new facility or not?
The first distinction that I want to make is that there is a huge myth, in my view, that the county farm operation, which is not the jail, a lot of people refer to us as the county farm. We're sensitive about that. We're not a farm here. We don't have animals here. We do operate a farm next door. And we provide inmate labor to assist that farm. So a lot of people in the community feel that the connection between the farm and the jail is significant, in that the jail provides a rehabilitative opportunity to inmates. And I mean no disrespect to any politician or any citizen that takes that position. I simply offer my point of view that says, A, it's only 6% at the very best of our population that has the opportunity to go to the farm and work. B, what do they do out there that will provide them a life skill that when they're released makes any difference in their earning potential, their education, or dealing with any issues with substance abuse that they want addressed? It does none of those things. So in my view, the fact to have a farm for the purpose of rehabilitation is inaccurate. If you want to have a farm for other reasons, that's fine. If you want to have a farm to preserve the history of farming and use it as a public education tool, terrific. But to say that we have to keep the farm because it's a good rehabilitative tool for inmates, I don't buy into that for those reasons. We're going to move to Keene, which is about 18 miles from here. And quite frankly, the decision by the commissioners has not yet been made with respect to whether or not we will bring inmate labor from Keene out to Westmoreland to work, or whether or not we will hire citizens in the community to fill those jobs. I think there are pros and cons to both. It's not just the farm that we provide labor to. We provide labor to the nursing home, its maintenance department up there, its laundry department, and its kitchen. So we're talking probably a dozen positions. I've also argued that much of the inmate labor, many of them are terrific workers, and that having an opportunity to get out of jail during the day to work, they're very productive. But I think everybody would agree with me when I say that that's not always the case. Sometimes you find people that are out there that are supposed to work who really spend more time avoiding work than they do working. In the event that we were to replace those inmate workers, it may not require as many civilian employees as it would inmates to do the same job.
Now, what was the main reason for deciding to move the facility? Was it just that this one had aged, or was it because there were problems meeting current demands as far as prisoner populations went?
Well, the first most important reason is that when you look at jail architecture, the purchase price of a correctional facility is really the least expensive expense that you will have. It's the operational costs that the taxpayer should be concerned with, and administrators and politicians should be concerned with, because the cost of the building will eventually go away. The operations of the building will not. So when considering whether or not to redesign a jail, one has to ask the question, in looking at that design, is it operationally efficient? Meaning, any jail design that you have, you want the fewest possible number of staff needed to maintain operations. This jail violates that principle significantly. We need a lot of correctional officers to do a minimal amount of work, because imagine, if you will, a series of honeycombed type areas where line of sight is very poor, so you can't see the offenders, so you need more officers to get those areas. You need officers to bring them to their meals. You need officers to bring them to medical attention. So the operation cost is very high. So the first reason it wasn't feasible to add on to this jail is that it's in significant need of refurbishment. The heating and ventilation systems are shot here. The plumbing is shot here. Much of the security systems are very old and constantly in need of repair. So there's a huge cost associated with that. Secondly, because of its design, it's not operationally efficient. It would make the operational cost much higher than it needs to be. The next big reason why we can't build on this particular site where we sit today is that between the time this institution was built and today, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Administration, has come out with new floodplain maps, and we now sit in a floodplain. So if we were to have today's maps apply back when this jail was built, we couldn't build this jail here. And we certainly don't want to build in a place that could flood or create other problems. So that meant that if we were going to build a jail in Westmoreland, we couldn't build it here. It would have to be in another location. So when the Board of Commissioners and the delegation attempted to move it to higher ground, it opened up further discussion in that if we're going to move it a little bit, what's the cost impact of moving it to an ideal location? And then we set out to find an ideal location, and that spawned a debate about where it ought to go or whether or not it should move at all. The short answer to your question is operational efficiency. Because this is a new design, we will increase the number of staff by a minimal amount. We will be able to manage twice the number of inmates that we do today. We're preparing for the future. We'll pay the cost of the bond down, and then we will have minimal costs of operation, which is what we should be doing if we're thinking about this in a smart way.
So largely, this decision was operational costs and not necessarily an overcrowding problem, first and foremost?
Well, the overcrowding problem is an entirely separate issue. It's like most things. I've been in public administration for 20 years, 15 here and then 5 in another county. And what I noticed about projects is everybody really likes to think that they know what's going on and that they're an expert. What I learned very quickly is that I think I know about jail operations and design and things like this 10 years ago when we first set out to do this. And then I began to meet architects. I went to the National Institute of Corrections to learn about design and operational costs. And the bottom line is people are quick to judge projects. People are quick to judge locations. People are quick to say that doesn't make sense, or it does. When in reality, they don't have the background, the education, or the experience and training that's required for a project that's so comprehensive. I understand that as a taxpayer. Oftentimes when I hear about a project, I find myself doing that very same thing. The bottom line is everything is a lot more comprehensive than it seems on the outset.
Welcome back to Free Minds TV. I mean, Richard, he says it best himself. I think that I would also encourage people to go back and see part 1 of the interview. It's up at freemindstv.com. It says a lot of good stuff on there. There's also an extended version that's going to be playing here on Cheshire TV, unedited interview. We talked to him for really about a little over 30 minutes. It's also going to be up on the member section of Free Minds TV if you want to join and become a member. It's real cheap. freemindstv.com, $3 a month or $30 a year. All right, Nick. Every week we see what people can do to have their voice be heard on the federal level in a Downsizer Dispatch. What's this week's Downsizer Dispatch?
Well, this week's Downsizer Dispatch deals with Real ID, and we've been following this, the developments, the matter that's coming to a head here, that some states aren't going to ask for an extension by the end of March, or at least that's what the assumption we're operating under now, because we're getting really right down to the wire. New Hampshire's among those states, but specifically for Montana, they have not asked for an extension. Their governor has said he will not do it, and they will not comply with Real ID. They won't even ask for an extension from the Department of Homeland Security. So basically what the feds have done is they've granted Montana an extension, even though Montana said we don't want an extension. So the feds have essentially backed down because they weren't really in a place where they felt they could hold their ground. And they are really losing in this battle. They have 4 states that have said they aren't really going to ask for even an extension to comply. And then there are about 14 other states that have said they're probably not going to comply either, but they've asked for the extension to kind of delay the problems that are going to affect people who have a non-Real ID compliant state ID. Because if your state doesn't comply, basically what's going to happen is your ID won't be recognized by the feds as an ID. So when you travel, you have to go through the secondary screening. They won't consider it a government-issued ID. And you know, this is something that really on the federal level, if we want this to go away completely, we're going to have to get our representatives to repeal it. And Johnson Unu has said he's opposed to Real ID. He would be a good person to contact. So if you go to downsizedc.org, they have it set up so that you can contact your federal representatives, whether you live in New Hampshire or in any other state. Contact your representatives in Congress and in the Senate and ask them to repeal the bill.
It only takes about 2 minutes. I mean, if you've never been to downsizedc.org before, it takes about maybe a total of 2 or 3 minutes to set up an account, and after that it takes about 20 seconds to contact your representatives. Very fast and easy. I encourage people to do it. Any issue you want to have your voice be heard on, it makes it incredibly easy. So downsizedc.org. All right, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the rising cost of the Iraq War. Also, a bailiff forgot about someone in a prison cell for many, many days, and a whole lot more right after this.
We're at war. At war against the planet. A war that can never be won. Marijuana can kill you. If you smoke 15 tons in 15 minutes, the equivalent of eating 10 raw potatoes.
Welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. I'm Toby Island.
And I'm Nick Michaelevich.
Okay, Nick, I want to talk a little bit about the cost of the Iraq War, because we've talked a lot about the cost of life, because people are dying every single day in Iraq, both U.S. military members, civilians, and supposed terrorists, or I don't know, depending on how you think of them, the opposition. Who America is fighting in Iraq. And so there's a lot of life being lost, but how much money is being lost? Well, studies show Iraq costs the United States $12 billion per month. The flow of blood may be ebbing, but the flow of money into the Iraq war is steadily rising. New analyses show that in 2008, its sixth year, the war will cost approximately $12 billion a month, triple the burn rate of the earlier years. Beyond 2008, working with the best case and most realistic moderate scenario, they project that the Iraq and Afghan wars, including long-term U.S. military occupations of those countries, will cost the U.S. budget between $1.7 trillion and $2.7 trillion or more by 2017. It's also estimated that as much as $816 billion will be added to that number in interest on these payments alone, because we don't have the money for this. We're just borrowing it or printing more. So interest rates on top of the 1.7 to 2.7 trillion in the next 9 years. This is something that we just can't afford. We've heard John McCain saying that we may be there for 100 more years. Well, if it's going to cost us over $3 trillion in the next 9 years, what's it going to cost us in the next 100?
Right, and we're paying for this, like you said, the same way we're paying for a lot of other things, or that our government does anyway. And it's basically by essentially putting them on a credit card and borrowing the money at an interest rate. And every year that they delay paying off interest rates, it builds up. It makes it more to pay off. It's almost like having a credit card. So this isn't just that we owe a couple $1 trillion in the next couple years, but we're going to owe a couple $1 trillion with interest. And if we don't pay it off, and the economy's not doing too well, so we might not have the ability to pay this off, the interest is going to compound, and that adds up.
Well, I think the only sensible thing to do is pull the troops back for many reasons, not just the cost in money of the Iraq war, but that's definitely a huge factor. We're pretty much mortgaging our grandkids' futures here. They're not going to be able to pay this back, especially with the rising costs of the problems that we're having abroad. I mean, the Social Security, Medicaid, these are these promised payments that we're going to owe trillions of dollars on top of the Iraq war. It's pretty much impossible to pay.
And this is a little bit of a different article, but from Little Rock, Arkansas. A bailiff who forgot about a woman locked in a courthouse holding cell and left her there for 4 days without food, water, or access to a bathroom has been suspended for 30 days, but will keep his job.
Oh, well, that's good.
That's what officials said Wednesday, being today. The Washington County Corporal Jared Hankins acted without intentional misconduct when he left Adriana Torres Flores in a 9 by 10 foot prison cell. It was a holding cell at the jail. What happened was, according to him, she appeared in court last Thursday on charges of selling pirated CDs. She was also an illegal immigrant. But she pleaded not guilty, unlike the other co-defendant she had. She was put in a holding cell by this bailiff. Well, he forgot about her.
Even though for the weekend or something?
Well, he was on duty Friday, but supposedly didn't hear her, and still didn't know about her. I guess they had a snowstorm in Arkansas. And they didn't find her until Monday morning, when they went to put another prisoner in the cell. So she could have died. I mean, 4 days without water, food.
Yeah, I was reading the article. It says she had to drink her own urine to stay alive. So pretty harsh punishment for selling a couple of CDs. Does it say whether this is like time served, like a little bit of cruel and unusual punishment? We're not going to charge you with it anymore, or what's going to happen to her?
I have a feeling it's going to. It doesn't say. I have a feeling it's going to have an effect on her case. Since she is a Mexican citizen, the Mexican consul visited her in the hospital. She's been treated and released already, but the Mexican government wasn't happy about this, understandably so, and because if an American was treated this way, I'm sure we would complain. And this is, I mean, she could have died, and that's something you don't get fired for. I mean, in any other job, a minor mishap where you damage some property is probably going to get you fired in the private sector, most likely. But if you forget about a person in a jail cell for 4 days and nearly kill them, that doesn't get you fired. I mean,
30 days, is that without pay at least?
It just says suspended for 30 days. My guess, usually when they do a suspension, it's with pay. So it might just be a paid vacation, which...
Nice. Well, what are you going to do? All right, when we get back, it looks like U.S. Rep. Barney Frank files legislation to decriminalize marijuana on the national level. Nick's got a story about a trucker strike, I think, and a whole lot more when we come back on Free Minds TV.
Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof,
or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press,
or the right of the people to peaceably assemble,
and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. We use our rights to spread the truth.
The First Amendment. The Constitution protects it, but it's up to you to preserve it.
Welcome back to Free Minds TV. I am Toby Island.
And I'm Nick Michaelevich.
All right, we've talked a lot about the decrim bill right here in New Hampshire, House Bill 1623, which just last week went through the House of Representatives here, the New Hampshire House, and is now going to be going on to the New Hampshire Senate. Would decriminalize 0.25 ounces of marijuana or less in New Hampshire. It would be more of a speeding ticket than a misdemeanor, something that tracks someone through life, maybe forces them not to go to college or not get that job, really hurting young people. Well, U.S. Rep. Barney Frank files legislation to decriminalize marijuana on the federal level. Congressman Barney Frank, representing the 4th District of Massachusetts, plans to file legislation this week that would decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana on the national level. So this is would be some pretty good news. I mean, I don't know how far it would go, but the article goes into other things such as this bill comes at a crucial crossroads for legislation movement, with the effort to decriminalize marijuana the strongest it's been in many decades. So pretty much since the 1970s and the Reagan Just Say No eras, there's a lot of sentiment to decriminalize marijuana and stop hurting and arresting people for making a choice to maybe smoke instead of drink. I mean, it's a personal choice, and it's been shown to be less harmful than many other legal drugs. So this would be some good news, great for freedom in America.
Well, but it's important to remember it's a move in the right direction, and we have to remember, though, that state laws would still exist. So states would still have to decriminalize to make something decriminalized at the state level, even though there wouldn't be the DEA enforcing on a certain amount of marijuana possession. But really, when you think about it, couldn't we just get rid of all the federal drug laws and let the states set their own policy, one that reflects what people in individual states want to see for their communities? I mean, there's varying opinions on drug policy, even within a given state. It seems like the more localized you can make drug policy, the closer it'll be to what the people represented by that political unit want. So if you can get it down to the state level, some people might say it's impractical to go to a local level. But at least at a state level, you have some say. Even if you're in favor of keeping drug laws where they are, maybe you're in favor of making them stricter. But right now, you don't really have much representation in Congress either way. So why not make it a state policy and see what works best? Some states will have a restrictive policy, and some won't.
Anyone who likes the Constitution out there couldn't really argue with that. I mean, leave it up to the states if it's not in the federal power.
Right. And we're also looking at potential problems with oil, basically. Gas prices are at record highs, and they're probably heading up based on everything that I've heard. And this has some truckers on the ropes. Diesel, as I've been driving around Keene, it's been around $4.14 in that range. And a lot of truck drivers are saying they just aren't able to make money, make a living doing this. So they're planning a grassroots strike on April 1st. That would be Monday. And this is something, trucker strikes usually haven't gone very far in the past, but right now there are a lot of truckers who are saying they're going to have to take their rigs off the road either way, so they might as well go on strike. This could mean some shortages at the grocery store, at retail stores. So, you know, if you want to stock up, go ahead. People probably aren't going to starve. It's not the end of the world, but it is going to mean shortages, higher prices. But there are some reasons why we don't have cheap oil, and a lot of people blame the oil companies, But a lot of it's based on supply and demand. I mean, oil prices go up like any other commodity because China and India are accounting for 2/3 of the increased demand that we have right now. The supply is fixed, and our government won't let us explore oil in the United States. They won't let us drill offshore. And they recently mandated new low sulfur requirements for diesel, which pushed the price up too. So a lot of this is government policy. And if you check into it, 9 out of 10 oil reserves in the world are either owned by a government or owned by a state-run company. So, you know, largely this is government policy. If government would let people simply get oil out there, it'd be cheaper. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I think that it's also maybe important for people to think about investing in alternative energies as well. We're going to be forced to in the future. So an important story to look to. I mean, if anything happens with this, we will be reporting on it next week. All right, well, if you think the show's worth $1 or $2, help us out. FreeMindsTV.com. You can help us donate from there. We're trying to raise $500 to broadcast live from Porcupine Freedom Festival June 14th. If you want to learn more, FreeMindsTV.com. Click the donate button. You'll also get perks such as access to the members section. We have all the old archives up there, as well as some bonus content, bonus podcasts, as well as bonus little clips that we do here on the show. Unless you're here in Keene, they're also shown on Cheshire TV. Also, plug the podcast. We've been doing a podcast, audio only, and bonus to this. In addition, FreeMindsTV.com. It's a kind of, we have a few more people who are behind the scenes that do the podcast with us. It's a lot of fun. If you enjoy the show, think about that. One other thing, next week, Ian Bernard from nationally syndicated radio show Free Talk Live and from FreeKeene.com is going to be on the show, talking a little bit about Freedom Fest in Keene, New Hampshire, something where there's going to be quite a few different local activists coming out and talking about freedom, meeting people on the streets, getting them energized about it. If you want to learn more about that, fest.freekeene.com. Join us online at freemindstv.com. It's been Toby here with you.
And Nick. Join
us next week for an all-new episode. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.
The deadly narcotic, more deadly, is the menace of marijuana.